Hello there, my name is Flor Stelmach and now we'll unveil the top news of these days. Today is the second anniversary of the first meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, better known as Ramstein, and it was today that another 21st meeting took place. As Pentagon Press Secretary Pat Ryder said, it is notable that despite Russia's assumptions that the international community would fragment and lose interest in supporting Ukraine over time, the opposite has been true. I will remind you that the group is composed of 50 nations and it has remained unified in opposition to Putin's invasion. Putin also thought his attack on Ukraine would somehow fracture the NATO alliance itself.
You've seen the NATO alliance for collective defense expand, underscoring international consensus that Ukraine's security matters to the security of all of our nations. Patrick Ryder, U.S. Department of Defense Press Secretary.
According to the Defense Minister of Ukraine, this year the format of aid to Ukraine is being modified to the so-called Ramstein 2.0. This means that from now on, Ukraine's allies will provide their support mainly not on an individual basis, but in a coalition format, and in accordance with their formed need. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense calls on all countries to step up their efforts to repel Russian aggression and to join the coalition that best matches the capabilities of each of them in providing military aid to Ukraine. As of now, 8 coalitions have been created, among them such as the Coalition of Aviation Capabilities, Anti-Aircraft and Anti-Missile Defense. According to the procedure, each of the 8 declared coalitions is headed by a leader country, which attracts other participants to it. Thus, dozens of NATO countries participate in it daily. Countries such as Japan and Australia have also already announced their intention to participate or are working on joining various coalitions. I would also remind you that the format of coalitions of capabilities was created in 2023 for more effective assistance by partner countries within the framework of the Contact Group on Defense of Ukraine. Today is also another anniversary. 38 years ago, the tragedy at the Chornobyl nuclear power plant left a huge scar for the whole world. A radiation leak turned a once cozy and developed area into an exclusion zone. Today, the 30-kilometer zone around Chornobyl nuclear power plant remains a dangerous place with a high concentration of radiation. Last year, the occupier not only seized the nuclear plant, but also put the whole world at risk again. Ukraine and the world paid a high price for the elimination of the consequences of this disaster, which continues to do this to this day. We must do everything to prevent the terrorist state from using nuclear energy facilities to blackmail Ukraine and the whole world. Russians never thought about the consequences. In 1986, non-compliance with engineering rules and negligence led to an accident at the Chornobyl power plant, one of the worst disasters in history. More than 600,000 residents participated in the liquidation of its consequences, and 5 million were affected. Now Moscow has created the threat of a much larger disaster when it occupied the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. The Kremlin shows complete disregard for the demands of the international community, in particular the International Atomic Energy Agency, for the immediate withdrawal of military personnel and other personnel from the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. At the same time, Ukraine is making every effort for the safe operation of the Zaporizhzhia plant. We continue to supply it with electricity from the energy grid of Ukraine, ensuring the operation of safety systems of the nuclear facility. The only way to restore nuclear safety and security in Europe is for Russia to withdraw its troops from the NPT and hand over control of the plant to Ukraine.
In view of the continued volatile situation around Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, International Atomic Energy Agency Director General Rafael Mariano Grossi today reiterates his call for maximum restraint and strict observance of the 5 concrete principles established by him at a meeting of the United Nations Security Council on May 30, 2023. Director General Grossi particularly emphasized the need to protect at all times the physical integrity of the ZNPP and avoid any attack or military activity that could impact the safety and security of the facility. Director General Grossi's statement on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant.
But the Kremlin is no longer protective of Russian territory. A radioactive disaster after a flood is possible, even in Kurgan region. Part of a uranium deposit in Kurgan region was flooded, satellite images show. Rosatom still denies this. Environmentalists believe that the radioactive solution ended up in the Tobol River. According to environmental activists, in the flood zone recorded by satellite images, there are both old and new wells for uranium mining. Scientists believe that high concentration of uranium salts in water can lead to internal radiation when drinking this water. The release of uranium solution into the river can lead to an increase in the number of cancer diseases. But who in the Kremlin is interested in the problems of regions if they can spend money on war? More contract soldiers are prepared to be enlisted in Russia as it presses the invasion of Ukraine, aiming to avoid, at least for now, another mass call-up that could undermine popular support for the war. The Kremlin is anxious not to repeat the September 2022 mobilization, which shook public confidence and triggered an exodus of as many as a million Russians from the country, Bloomberg reported. Bolstered by its advantage in ammunition, the Russian army is continuing to advance as Ukraine's forces struggle because of delays in US and European military aid and personnel shortages. To be sure, relying on a gradual influx of new troops to replace losses and build up numerical strength rather than simply calling up another 300,000 in one go limits Russia's military options. Russia has detailed plans to expand its armed forces to 1.5 million people from 1.15 million people right now, of which 650,000 have had combat experience in Ukraine, Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said in December. The Russian Defense Ministry on April 3rd said that more than 100,000 new recruits had signed up so far this year, with as many as 1,700 people volunteering a day. Russia's using generous financial incentives to attract people to the war. Since the beginning of the year, regional payouts to new contract soldiers have increased 40% to an average of $5,000. The Russian authorities are trying now not to carry out a new mobilization as long as they have the opportunity to do it. Ultimately, any call-up would be Putin's decision. And the Russian leader has stoked speculations. The Kremlin is preparing the ground for a potential next mobilization of reservists by accusing Ukraine without evidence of involvement in the Moscow concert hall attack last month that killed more than 140 people, even as the Islamic State claimed responsibility. For now, the army command is in part relying on getting some current conscripts to sign contracts, according to two people familiar with the situation. This spring, 150,000 Russians will be drafted for standard military service. The law allows those conscripts to be sent to the battlefield after 4 months of military service. However, that would be violating repeated public pledges not to deploy conscripts to the war zone, so army officials are pushing them to switch to a professional contract, which they can do from the first day of their service under legislative changes approved last year. But first, let's see how the situation on the battlefield will change after American aid arrives in Ukraine. That concludes our today's video for now. Thank you for watching. Stay updated, comment, like and subscribe to our UATV English channel for more news from Ukraine. Your support is what really matters. Goodbye.